College basketball is back starting this afternoon, and one of our tip-off treats right here on YouTube over on the Field of 68 channel is your St. Louis Billikens starting off the Josh Schertz era with a battle against your favorite basketball nerd's favorite basketball school, Santa Clara. The Broncos are a tough baptism for Schertz as Herb Sendek is returning 71% of his scoring from last season, and that honestly underrates the amount of comfort and familiarity for this Santa Clara squad. One of their two big transfers for this season is actually a returning player. Carlos Stewart left Santa Clara after 2 successful years to go to LSU, where his season was shortened by injury. He's now back where he belongs in the starting lineup for the Broncos under Sendek. And we're going to talk about that other transfer later on, because it's not just scoring that the Broncos are returning from last year, but it's a lot of size. The Broncos return 6'7" NBA prospect Adama Alpha-Ball, 6'9" Johnny O'Neal, the 7-footer Christoph Tilley, and the other transfer, that's the wing Elijah Mahi. You'll see plenty of him this afternoon, and he stands at 6'7". So that's 4 players just in the starting lineup at 6'7" or taller. And you can't forget about the bench as well. Cameron Tongue comes in at 6'6". You have 6'5" Tyree Bryant, 6'9" Jake Emsminger. There's also a couple other big players, including another Cthulhu-like mystery coming off that bench, and that's 6'9" freshman Alan Graves, who was last year's Louisiana Gatorade Player of the Year. How can the New Look Billikens beat this length later today? Let's dive in. Josh Schertz, like many basketball players, coaches, and fans, has been poisoned long ago by analytical heathens like Daryl Morey, who had the audacity to figure out math and began sprouting their chief blasphemy, efficiency, and their most marketable heresies, a gluttony of three-pointers, layups, and free throws. Just look at the Billikens shooting charts from their first 2 games under Josh Schertz. The name of the game is spacing. That's wrong. Spacing. There we go. And that's exactly what a team with the length and size of Santa Clara can screw with to ruin a debut for your 2 new players, Robbie Avila and Isaiah Swope. Santa Clara doesn't switch as much as you expect from their length, especially in pick-and-roll sets. And let's take a look at actually their big win against Gonzaga last year to give us a look at how they face off against a top team when they're looking for a big win. Again, they do not switch as much as you expect from their length, and maybe they change that up this year, especially in pick-and-roll sets. They're usually good at funneling the ball handler into inhibition areas while mostly dropping their bigs to clog the paint. They tag rollers and they stun off wings better than almost any other D1 team I've ever seen. 2 things that are only accentuated and only work even better because of the massive long limbs of the Broncos put on the court. Which is why the Broncos' extreme length could be a bigger problem for the Billikens' perimeter shooting than their play in the paint. If you want to get some good reading done today, check out Stu on SLU. You should be subscribing here if you're not already. And Stu points out a great point that despite all the length and great rebounding, they only blocked just under 3 shots last year. So the rim protection isn't where Santa Clara succeeded in defense last year. Driving kick, pick and roll, dribble handoffs. These are a lot of what you'll see from any college offense, but it's mostly what we've seen from Josh Schertz and the Billikens through preseason and exhibition play. All those things can and will be mitigated and screwed with by Santa Clara's ability to recover in the perimeter and disrupt in the passing lanes. On Thursday, Josh Schertz said that he's not scared with just size, but size with skill scares me when talking about the Santa Clara squad. And there's no doubt that they have that in spades. That doesn't just seal the deal for the Broncos in today's game. The Broncos gave up some big games from scoring guards last year, including a few undersized scorers. Last season, we saw big games from Duquesne's Day-Day Grant, who had 32 against Santa Clara. They also gave up big games off the bench from San Diego's Deuce Turner, a 25-pointer and a 30-pointer from him off the bench. They did shut him down in their 3rd game, but they also gave up 30-point games to Tyler Robertson of Portland in both matchups against those teams. Now, they did win both those games, but nonetheless, there is some precedent for Isaiah Swope to get loose and hit a couple of, I swear, the prettiest step-back threes you'll ever see in college basketball. And to that point, Santa Clara has all the tools, but didn't put together enough of those tools last year. They finished with a defensive rating of 134th in KenPom, and they allowed three-pointers at a bottom 3rd rate, 215th in the nation. They did do a good job, again, of closing out because of that length, and they held teams to just 31.4% from 3, which was good for 45th in the nation and best in the Western Conference. The other interesting mark is a couple of big games from talented big men, albeit ones with slightly different profiles compared to Robbie Avila, Maxime Renault, and former Bulldog turned Wolverine, Danny Wolf. Look at 7-1-2-35. Renault has the height advantage over Avila, but looking at their 23-24 profiles again, they compare well. And so here's a look at how the freshman cooked Santa Clara for 26 points on 10 of 15 from the floor. He did go over 3 in the game. They did a good job covering his deep shooting. But as you can see, a lot of what he's coming from is he's attacking off pick and rolls that are staggered off dribble handoffs. That is an action that I could very well see Schertz implementing in this game to get Robbie Avila more and more looks. And just overall, pick and rolls, pick and pops like you're seeing in these clips, and these dribble handoffs are already things we've seen from the Billikens. So they look like they could work to get Avila similar looks like we saw Renault get against Santa Clara last year. Now, here's the big change. And this last highlight from Renault is going to show you. He's going to blow by Tilly from the perimeter. And so there's a good chance, and Josh Schertz mentioned this week, that they move Tilly off of Avila, try to put him on who they see as a more of a non-shooter with the Billikens, and then they put a more athletic wing on Avila to slow him down. More on that in just a moment. We're going to talk about the other big game from a big guy, and that was Danny Wolf's 25-point effort in the Yale 66-58 win in Santa Clara last year. He played more of a bully ball than I would expect from Robbie Avila today, especially since Robbie Avila's cutting the pounds. But he also showed how an early trigger can be useful if Santa Clara is giving you that space and also their vulnerability off the drive. Again, Josh Schertz mentioned it on Thursday. He expects them to put their 5 on a different non-shooter and put a more athletic player on Avila to take those kind of drives away from him. But you can see here in Danny Wolf's game, that kind of game from a big man kind of throws off the Santa Clara system at times. Again, Danny Wolf's also an extremely talented player, 6 foot, 255, and these kind of handles, that's a dangerous kind of player. I haven't seen this from Robbie Avila necessarily, but we know he's dangerous in other areas. So that brings us back to the main question. How do the Billikens beat the length and familiarity of this Broncos team? Number one, as Schertz talked about with reporters before practice on Thursday, the name of the game is always space. But it doesn't matter if you create the space if you don't use it, which means quick decision-making and a willingness to pull the trigger. If St. Louis second-guesses themselves or waits or just anything along those lines, Santa Clara is going to close out every single time. Those margins of space, which is something that Schertz talked about, disappear quicker against this kind of team. So your decision-making at the rim, your decision-making at the trigger positions need to be quicker and better if you're going to stay ahead of the rotations and length of this Santa Clara team. Number two, off-ball movement is at a premium. Of course, it's basketball. We know that. Just look at with how Jason Kent was so useful for Josh Schertz. You can go back and look at this video. Look at how stale the Zags are when they're not scoring against Santa Clara, and look how much movement is being used to create the looks for Renault and Wolf in those two big games from those big men. Off-ball movement needs to action because when you have Santa Clara constantly tagging and stunting, you need to take advantage of that with off-ball cuts. And again, we'll talk about a little bit more about how they can take advantage of that right now. And the third point is going to be Robbie Avila, Kalu Anya, and Kellen Thames utilizing their versatility. Obviously, this is going to be a big game for Robbie Avila. Again, they're going to try to take him away by using athletic wings to take away what he usually likes, but he still needs to get his. Specifically, going back to the other point about Danny Wolf, I didn't expect that kind of bully ball for Avila, but if he gets smaller defenders, maybe we will expect that kind of bully ball from Avila, and then obviously the usual playmaking from him. But how is that playmaking going to come? He's going to need help from the other players, and that's where we bring in Kalu Anya and Kellen Thames. With the aforementioned potential switch from the Broncos putting a larger, more plotting center onto Kalu Anya, there's a good opportunity for the Brown transfer to steal some of the debut shine this afternoon, as Schertz has lauded his ability to attack closeouts against slower defenders by putting the ball on the floor and getting to the rim. Anya has also shown the vision to hit cutters on the move, and you know with the shooters they have, that can be extremely useful for the Billikens. He's also shown the ability to knock down the occasional spot of three, but I will say right now his release is a little slow, and again, Santa Clara is going to close fast, so maybe that's not as useful in this particular matchup. On to Kellen Thames, St. Louis's nominal six-man. That might change. He could also eat from the same feast as Kalu Anya, getting positive matchups from slower, bigger defenders throughout the game, while Santa Clara is focusing on Robbie Avila, giving him chances to spot up on the perimeter, attack closeouts, and then hunt for things he loves, which is posterizing people on cuts and offensive rebounds. The big curveball now, of course, is we don't know what's going to happen with the potential absence of Kobe Johnson, and that could therefore slot things into the starting lineup, and that completely changes all the rotations for St. Louis. It means that A.J. Casey, maybe the freshmen Amari Tatri and Max Picard are playing more. It changes the balance. It changes the rotation. It changes everything. I don't know if Thames gets those slower matchups as a 4 or as a hybrid, as Schertz likes to call it, if they're playing more A.J. Casey because Kobe Johnson is out. We'll see more of that once the starting lineups are announced. Kobe Johnson or not, the Billikens have a very tough matchup to start the season. And if there's anything that seems to tip the scales early in college basketball, it's returning minutes and points. And the Broncos have one of those strongest bets in college basketball when it comes to that stat. They're returning, again, a ridiculous amount of points, and they're getting back Carlos Stewart. So that 71% actually probably should be jacked up a little bit higher if you're considering the amount of familiarity that they are returning. It's going to be a tough one. Herb Sendek has been dialing in this system now going into his 9th year. And again, it's a neutral site against a veteran team that knows the system. You're dialing in your system as a first-year player with a lot of new guys. There's just a couple players who were here in St. Louis last year, just 2 players who were with Josh Schertz in his system last year. It's going to be a tough matchup, but Josh Schertz knows how to get his offensive players rolling. He knows that space is going to be what wins this game. Now the question is going to be whether or not the Billikens can take advantage of and beat the size and experience of Santa Clara in Sioux Falls. We'll see you later today at 2 p.m. I'm Matthew Rocchio. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing on here, but if I do, it's going to be including a lot of breakdowns like this about St. Louis basketball, including probably later on this week a breakdown of what happens today in Sioux Falls against the Broncos and the Billikens. Enjoy the game later today, again, over on the Field of 68 podcast. So if you're watching this right before the game starts, just click off this, go over to the Field of 68, and then you're watching the Billikens play some basketball and tip off their season in this Josh Schertz era. Have a great day.